Sharon Davidson. Welcome to my show, Up-Level Your Life with Sharon. I'm an ICF certified coach with over 20 years of holistic practice. This podcast is your toolkit for transformation. I offer practical strategies to improve your relationships, well-being, and overall happiness. If you're struggling with low self-esteem, lack of energy, or feeling stuck, you're in the right place. Let's up-level your life together. Welcome back, everyone. I have a special guest here today, Kim Conradie. Kim, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show, Sharon. It's
Uh,
really with gratitude that I'm here today to your listeners.
I am very happy to have you on my show. I'd like to tell the audience that we met at the International Coaching Federation conference last year,
Hmm,
kind of by perfect design, right? So, Kim, tell
absolutely.
our audience about you.
Sharon and I met in San Diego, which is quite funny because we are both from South Africa, born and bred. And so I'm Cape Townian. I live in the southernmost part of Africa. And um, I think through my life's work, have landed in coaching um, again by design. I am the founder of Mindfulness Manor, which is the name of my coaching practice. And um, Manor is very special to me because it means in abundance. But it's also the last two letters of my daughter's names. So Emma and Hannah.
Oh,
And that's where manna came from because they were certainly given to me in abundance um, as twins.
remind me how old they are.
Turning 13 this
Good.
year, Sharon, turning 30.
Blessings, blessings, blessings.
Yes.
Well, I will tell you, we met a whole lot of people at Converge, and it was like I felt like I was at home with with my
Mm.
people, and it was amazing. And so I love that we're still in contact. And I
Yes.
and I love the work that you do. And you do live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Cape Town is definitely, San Diego's gorgeous, it is, but Cape
Yeah.
Town is definitely
Well, San
magnificent.
Diego reminded me a lot of Cape Town.
Yeah.
So I definitely felt at home.
I did study in Cape Town, so I am familiar with it for a while. So, Kim, let's talk a little bit about the work that you do and the change
Mm.
that you help people to make. And we were talking about this a while back. Why does the mind get louder and start replaying conversations or decisions the moment life begins to shift? And I know that you've had a lot of shifts that have happened in your life recently. So let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about what the mind does to us and how it hijacks us.
Yes. So, I don't think any one of us is spared from going through a form of life transition. It's something that is one thing all humans have in common. And it's whether it's, something positive or we go through a life transition that really tests our boundaries. And so this becomes a very important topic for me because it's sometimes we feel that, and look, the primary function of our brain is to keep us safe. That's the
Right.
primary function, right? That's primitive. It was designed in a way to anticipate if there's saber-toothed tigers and get our defenses up and our adrenals going to protect us. And so that's its primary function. So while it's such a unique function in our body, it's also very primitive. And our brain will, during transitions or any form of change in our life, our brain starts looking for methods and tools on how it needs to protect us. And so it gets louder. Our mind gets louder, our thoughts get more dominant, and we go into a mental loop. And so I think we can agree that when we go through change, uncertainty is something that becomes very disruptive for us. So it feels unsafe. We try to control to keep us safe, and that's what our brain ultimately tries to do during moments when we feel unsafe and unfamiliar.
Right, because even it doesn't matter whether the situation is not an ideal situation. It
Mm.
is that familiarity is
Yes.
safer than the unknown to us.
Yes, yes. So our job or our mind's job is to restore certainty. And so it wants to start replaying scenarios as a form of, of familiarity. It revisits conversations. It loops back. So it's like an old film that keeps playing back into areas that it can tap into that thinks it will feel safe in that space.
Right. And what we don't realize is that the brain is only 5 to 10% of the body, because so much of what takes place is the mind is 5 to 10%, because so much of what takes place is at the subconscious level. It is not at that
Correct.
conscious critical mind level.
Mm,
So
yeah.
just tell our audience a little bit about the survival mode for those that don't know. You tapped on, the primitive
Mm.
behavior, but just explain to the audience what takes place and why the brain goes into survival mode and what it does
Yeah.
to the body.
So again, going back to what its function is to detect danger. And so the brain, it, yeah, the system doesn't work well enough almost to distinguish between uncertainty and danger.
Right,
So when we go through change, we face uncertainty, and that's what we are scared of. We are not afraid of what is coming in terms of the existential
right,
experience. We are afraid of the uncertainty that comes with that. And so while our brain is trying to mitigate and navigate all of this change that's going on, its primary function is what am I exposed to? Am I have I lost control? Um, can I cope with this new direction? Um, so the body then activates.
right, right. And we go into fight, flight, freeze, all those
Correct.
in order to keep
Yes.
us safe. So
Yes.
just let's talk about, in what ways does the nervous system read unfamiliarity or a loss of control as a physical threat?
Yeah. And so when you talk about the fight flight um, scenario, that's exactly what the role is. It's to activate the nervous system. So, am I in danger? What do I need to do if I am in danger? What are the tools that I need if primitive years, many millions of years ago, it was I need to protect and survive, and that's
Right,
survival instincts. And so it's very real today in
right,
today's world. And it's just the tools of what survival instincts are looks differently.
right,
So if you think about, and I love to use this analogy, it's like walking into a dark room, right? And so you're coming in from outside, it's bright, and you go into a dark room and you can't see anything. And so you start waving your hands around and you're trying to grab and trying to feel where things are in an unfamiliar space
right.
because you don't want to injure yourself. And so your hands are going all over the place.
I
And so
like that
that's our
analogy,
brain.
actually. Right,
Yeah.
right.
And so that's our brain. Our brain is looking around in the dark to try and keep us safe, to feel where the stumbling blocks are, to look out for the sofa that you may stub your toe on.
Right,
Um, and that's what we're talking about, activating the nervous system.
right. How can we navigate that inner noise that occurs even during the positive changes we want to make?
Yeah. So again,
Yeah.
change is change, whether it's positive, whether it's a desired change. So we get to a point where we go, oh, I've been working so hard for this and I'm finally here. And we start thinking about, wait, this is a new job. Wait, this is an end of a relationship. Wait, this is the start of a new relationship. And the antennas then start going up. Our hands start feeling, where's the sofa? and our nervous system gets activated. So even though it's change that we desire, whether it's positive or negative, it still goes into that mode. And so coming back to the space of overthinking, no amount of thinking is going to change that. It's not going to solve any problems. No replaying of situation over and over is going to solve any problems. We need to move out of our minds and move into our bodies.
Right. You know what it brings up for me is that
Mm,
I am happy to watch a scary movie,
mm,
but I want to know what the end's going to be
yeah,
because
I
it
think we're the same.
trains my brain to go, okay, I know what the outcome's going to be. I do not
Yeah,
want to sit here and be in this anticipation state. I just want to
yeah.
know the end, and then I can talk myself out of being scared or whatever it is with the movie, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so it's again going back to controlling that narrative. And
Right,
my sister has a huge problem with me because when we watch a series, because it's always in the group chat, what are you watching on Netflix? What are you doing? This, what are you doing? And so she'd give the series and I go, okay, and I watch season one and I go, oh, this is quite gripping, or the first episode. And then I'd go all the way down to the last episode and see what's happening in the last episode because I'm not prepared to waste my emotions through the process of something that is not a desired outcome.
right,
So,
right,
yeah, yeah. And so that's a typical example of what we're trying to do. So we're trying to control, we're trying to create a space of safety. We're
right,
trying to create a narrative that feels familiar.
right, right.
Yeah.
Why is there a sense of grief in growth? And how does that contribute to our mental clutter?
Mm. So grief is I like the saying, I heard it in the week. Actually, this week, someone said to me, there's growth in grief, one of my clients. And I love that because, um, again, looping back to the positive change or the negative change, it's something that's being lost, it's something that's being left behind.
Mhm.
And it, and understanding that when we have to leave something behind, even if we're moving into something more fruitful, or something desired, it's still unpleasant. So we don't distinguish between the fact that, and sometimes it's not on the surface, and sometimes it's just deep inner
Absolutely.
work, and we feel this disruption, but we can't really articulate what it is.
Right,
And so and that is why grief then starts surfacing in
right.
ways and manifesting in ways that we may not actually be able to articulate while we're going through this process.
You know where it comes up for me with my clients is if someone's getting divorced or
Mm,
the loss of a relationship, and
mm,
even if they know that it is the right thing not to be in the relationship, it's the loss of the dream. They're grieving
yeah,
the what could have been as opposed to what is.
yeah, yeah.
And
You're
so it's
grieving the story. Yeah.
right. And
Mm,
so it's reframing what it
mm,
is. And I was
mm,
actually having a conversation with a friend yesterday. Her kids, so my kids are older. My kids are already 31 and 28. And
mm,
her kids are going through the college process. And so having been through it not only with my own kids, I mean, I went to college in South Africa. It's very, very different. And going
mm,
through the college process with all of my friends, my immigrant friends, right, from South Africa or wherever else, and then now going through it with my friends that are here and
mm,
talking about when the kids don't get into a certain college and they're so devastated. But
mm.
it's their perception of what the dream is of where they should go because they don't
Yeah,
have a reality, right?
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
concept of what everyone has told them or what they're projecting onto something as opposed to
Correct.
knowing what the reality is and being open to that. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
And so do you think it's an identity shift then that you are faced with?
Are you talking about in terms of being an immigrant,
No, no, no. When you're talking about
going to
the
college?
example that you move, yeah, yeah.
I think that the process is the kids, it's a very, very hard process, and
Mm,
the attachment to what it means about them when they get
mm,
in somewhere and when they don't. You know, how many colleges did we have? I actually did go away to college, which was really not a thing in South Africa. So I went from
mm,
Johannesburg to Cape Town. And then I ended
yeah.
up going back to Johannesburg to finish my degree. But you didn't kind of do that in South Africa because there
Mm,
weren't a lot of choices, right? And so you
mm,
just went to the local, you went to the Witwatersrand, University of the Witwatersrand, or you went to Cape Town,
mm,
University
mm,
of Cape Town. But here the kids go away. So so it defines them in terms of the prestige of where you get in and and not
mm,
even necessarily what's a good fit for you, because they don't really know.
mm,
Even if you travel and you go and you see the colleges, it doesn't you don't necessarily know what the experience is going to be there. And so now I'm hearing I
mm,
got in here, I didn't get in here, and then it yeah, it's a very
mm,
hard process for them
mm.
to handle.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I
my
suppose,
so what I say to them
mm,
is, you will end up exactly where you're supposed to go. No matter what, you
mm,
will end up in the right place. And I've seen that with my kids and what's happened with my kids, and even what, the subjects that they took and where they ended up. So
mm,
trusting the process as opposed to being in this mental state of it has to be this because this is what I've been conditioned to believe about
yeah,
what I
yeah.
should do or where I should go.
Yeah, yeah. I love that because it talks to that point of grief. And so during this
Right,
process of change, and so it's that emotional weight that you are almost saying, it's okay. I'm
right,
normalizing this. And I then have the ability to let go of something that is familiar and stepping into something
right,
that, you know, can bring joy and a new familiarity.
right.
Yeah.
I wish that they would actually spend more time discussing self-worth and well-being and
Mm,
honoring yourself, getting in touch with yourself, as opposed to this academic success striving
yeah. Yeah.
for this perfection, right? Because now I'm working with all of the people that are down the line that have accomplished, and now they're going, there's something more and I could have done it differently, and now they're trying to talk them, now we're working with getting off the ledge,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to
And so, yeah, it becomes a bit of a, I almost like to say it's a post-fit orthotic that you are doing.
right,
Yeah, because you are trying to able something that wasn't really, catered for initially.
right, which brings me to the next point, which is, what would it look like to choose grounding
Mm,
over problem solving, like when we feel disoriented? So
mm.
what can we draw from and hold on to?
I love this question, Sharon, because it's, if overthinking and the search for control is systemically coming from a place of feeling unsafe, what is safety? And
You're
so it
right,
goes back to the question of what is safety and how do we cultivate safety? Because our brain will latch onto whatever we tell it to.
right,
And so it's giving yourself that space. So instead of trying to create a solution to what you is the perceived problem or the change or the threat or the fear or the grief that you're going through, is what is going to enable me to feel safe now
right,
so that I can create a landing space for the clarity to arrive,
right,
right? So we want to create the landing space for the clarity to arrive and not necessarily the solution.
right. So it's that pause. And that's what
It's the
mindfulness is all
pause.
about, right?
Yes.
So from someone who literally would react to something without even thinking about it, I had to
Mm,
train myself to pause and then decide and be okay with whatever it was, and then make a decision
mm,
about how I was going to respond. That's mindfulness.
Absolutely.
And that's what
Yeah.
mindfulness teaches you.
Yeah.
Mindfulness teaches you that when you have a stimulus, how to
Mm.
pause, right?
Yes.
Which is the grounding that you're talking about.
Yes.
Notice what's going on to actually go, okay, there's not a tiger in front of me. What is in front of me? And then what do I want to do with it? So give us some exercises or
Yeah.
some ideas
So
on.
to that point that you were talking about, it's the reframing
Right,
in our brain. And so it's to create new narratives and it's to create new neural patterns for our brain to understand what a real threat is and what is not a real threat. And that's what actually builds capacity to deal with change.
right,
And so sometimes the process is weeks, sometimes the process is a couple of days, hours. It
right,
depends on the capacity you're giving yourself to actually work through, the acceptance process. And so I love narratives because it's so relatable. I want to use the narrative and I always do it, of a crab, so when a hermit crab moves from shell to shell, when it gets to that season of its life,
right,
it's the end of that season. So if it doesn't move out of that shell, it will die. And so it's forced to, for that moment,
right.
completely let go of that shell, expose itself in its vulnerability, find a new home, and enter that shell.
Love that.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where we are. And when we think about change and we think about mindfulness and we think about grounding, it's that space in between.
I say to my clients, let's look at what's in front of us. Is it a kitten, a cat,
Mm.
or a tiger, or a cage full of tigers? And
Yes.
then when you start to look at it a little bit differently and reframe it, or even just identify it, because that's another thing with mindfulness is just identifying, then you can make a choice about what needs to happen right there instead of everything being a cage full of tigers.
Mm. And sometimes the next step is to do nothing.
Right.
That in itself is a step. And so basic grounding practices is to bring yourself back into your body.
Okay, so for
What's
those,
happening for me?
okay,
Hmm.
so let's talk a
No,
little
go
bit
for it.
more about that for our listeners. For somebody who
Mm.
doesn't do that, they're just reactive. What in the moment when something happens and it's perceived to be this huge threat, what do you do? What is a tool? And also, you need to practice the tool, right? It's not you're not just going to say, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do," and then you think you're just going to do it because
No.
you're not going to
So
have
now,
access to it unless you've practiced it
yes.
in the moment. Yeah. Okay. So,
Yes. And so what we're doing now is we building the landing strip.
right.
Yeah. We don't want the solution we don't want to create that because that's going back inside the head, right? So that's going into this box over here. And we're going to try
Right.
and control the narrative with thoughts, with solutions, and that's what overthinkers do. It's like I need to have a plan A, B, C, and D. And in case that doesn't work, I need to be able
Right.
to default to the following so that I can have a sense of control. The only thing that we can really control is the moment that we have in front of us now. It's this moment, it's the present moment. Nothing that is happening in the future, nothing that's happening in the past. We don't have control over that. That's an illusion of what's happened.
Right.
So we want to get back into the moment and the space that we are in now. What can I do now? That's a good question to ask, actually. What can I do now in this present moment that will make me feel safe?
Okay. So, give us a couple of tools that the listeners can use.
So, a great example, a great tool that I like to use with clients that tend to overthink and go into their head. So remember, mindfulness is a mind heart connection, right? We want to find the space here, the sweet spot. And so if we are someone that lives dominantly up here, it's very difficult sometimes to tap into what's really going on in here.
Right.
And when we find that our thoughts are spiraling and we're going into the state of clutter and there's a whole lot of stuff happening on top here, we become top heavy. And so we
Right.
forget about everything else dangling down at the bottom.
Right.
And a good way to interrupt that pulses, the knee-jerk reactions, um, the activation phase of the neurosystem. A good way to do that is simply to observe, take a step back and look at your surroundings. And that's silent practice that you can do anywhere.
Right.
What am I seeing? I see a blue sky. I see a phone. I see shoes. I see some water. Name some colors. Look at the surroundings. There's a green tree over there. My, that's a lot of leaves on that tree. So what I'm doing in that moment, Sharon, is I'm getting outside of my head. So for that split second, my brain doesn't have the opportunity to ruminate.
Rest. So your brain can't do two things at once. You cannot be
It can't.
observing and also be thinking about what's going on.
You
You can only
you
do one
can't.
thing. Yes.
You can your brain is that primitive that it can only do one thing at a time. And this is what I'm saying. So when you are inside your head and the thoughts are punching and it's all over the place, step outside your head and in that split second you look at what's around you. And so while it's not going to provide you a solution right now, it's not going to take away the feelings that you're feeling of disruption. You may loop back into your thinking pattern again after that. What you're doing is you're creating a disruption in the thinking
Right.
process. And so it's weakening that auto response.
Right. And the more you practice, not to say that you won't ruminate. I always
Yeah.
say I was so good at blowing up the world. Like I allowed
Mm,
myself to get into these stories. Not to say that I don't ever default to it, but I'll tell you what I do is straight
mm.
away go, that's not helpful. So,
Yes.
and then interrupt it straight away
Yeah.
and then move on, right? So, but
Yeah.
that's with a lot of practice. It's
That's with
consistently
practice.
bringing
Yeah.
yourself back, right? With all of the mindfulness exercises, whether it's breathing, whether it's listening, whether it's looking, it doesn't matter, is the consistency and the practice because it means that you will then come back online quicker
Mm.
than you might have before with the ruminating and not being able to stop
Yes.
this ruminating
And
over and
so,
over and telling the
yes.
stories.
And so your ability to regulate
Exactly.
becomes tighter
Right.
and you are creating more capacity for yourself to identify that self-awareness becomes important. You go, oh, okay, wait, no, I'm stepping into that
Right.
space again. Let me just regulate. And so, I mean, that's not actually the words you're using in your head, but that's
Right.
really what's happening is your ability to regulate and come back from that and bounce back is a lot quicker. It's a lot tighter. It's more resilient. And so you're creating sustainable behavior, and that's really what mindfulness focus on is sustainable behavior.
Right.
So not quick fixes. It's
Right.
gonna require work. So going to gym, you wanna look good, and I'm gonna exercise. I'm gonna feel a bit of the shift and feel pain, the muscle aches the next day, and but you go back and you go back and you
Right.
drink your protein shakes and you stay away from the fast foods and you do whatever you need to do to get the body that you want. And then
Right.
one day you start going, whoa, you know,
I
it's
see the
starting to look
change.
good here. I see the
Absolutely.
change. And so it's exactly that space of vulnerability.
Right.
And that's that soft spot. And that's the mental clutter. That is the activation. That is that messy bit in between that is all tangled up.
Right.
And so we get to the point of being self-aware enough to go, okay, I'm identifying that this is what's happened. Here's change. This is what's going on in my head. And this is how I can untangle that.
Right.
Yeah.
Even
And
just
so,
the, go ahead.
sorry. No, what I wanted to say, so a lot of times in these life transitions or these situations, our default response is to want to find a solution.
Right.
Um, and that's not that's forceful. We want to get to a space where the clarity and the openness, the solution can come to us because we've got space
Exactly. So you have to get out of your brain and out of the self-talk in order for that clarity to come in because it
to
comes
come in.
in the emptiness. It doesn't come in,
Yes.
as you say, in the
There's
noise.
no
It
space.
doesn't come
Yeah,
in
it
the
can't come
noise.
in. There's no space. It
Right.
can't come in. There's no space. You're busy with other things. And so you're not giving yourself the opportunity to land on
To
what you
just
need to
be.
land. Yeah.
I'll tell you though that I think that the opportunity and the observation that I've had all of these years is we are we are taught to value accomplishment and doing. We
Mm.
are
The
not
identity,
taught
right?
to be. And
Mm.
so, even with a client yesterday, this young client, she's 14, she said to me, sometimes I just like to be lazy. And I
Mm.
said, what if we reframe that? That sometimes your body just needs rest and pause and not to be accomplishing every minute because we're overachievers and
Mm.
we overdoers.
Yeah, yeah. And that's important. When we talk about reframing, we're also talking about the words we are using.
Right.
And so sometimes we need to be sensitive to the type of words we're using when we're speaking to ourselves during that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
because that's the noise. Yeah, that's
and
the
as a
noise.
hypnotherapist, right, that it is that power of suggestion to ourselves and to others.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know, so just the fact of labeling something, just the fact of identifying something will also reduce some of the intensity of the emotion around it. Just labeling
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. And so it's us choosing to step into that space. It's that choice we're allowing ourselves. And
Absolutely.
again, when we feel like we have choice, when we feel like we are moving through a space of being able to identify an emotion, for example, we have a sense of control. We feel like I have options. And so we start lowering the cortisol levels. We
Right.
start lowering the
Right.
adrenaline, and
Exactly.
so the activation chemicals are starting to back down, and
Right.
organically we then realizing, wait, but I don't feel that flutter in my stomach
Exactly.
anymore. I don't feel like I'm waking up at all hours of the night. I don't feel like, oh, okay. And then define that and say, that is what safety looks like to me.
Exactly.
And so we say the words out loud, we define that, we create that new definition for our brain, and our brain goes,
Right.
okay, wait, now I know what safety looks like to
Exactly.
me.
Exactly. Yes, I just love it when I'm doing these exercises with my clients and you can see the shift. And then when they're coming
Mm.
back and they're saying, here's the change, and I'm not as anxious and I've been calmer
Yeah,
and I'm seeing the difference in what's happening in my world because of this. So I could talk
yes,
about mindfulness, it's absolutely one of
yeah.
one of my passions and
And so what's safe for you, Sharon, is not necessarily what's safe for me.
absolutely,
Yeah. And that's what
absolutely
makes us unique. And that, I
right,
think, is going back to the very beginning in our conversation,
right,
is what is it for me
right,
in this moment? The narrative,
right.
my lived experience.
Right, right.
Mm.
I love this. Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we've had quite a really uh, grounding conversation, if we should use that word lightly.
Right,
Um, but again, going back to the audience and saying, what will help me feel safe?
right,
So if we don't know where to start, that's okay. We don't
right.
need to have the answers for everything, and that's
Absolutely.
okay. But right now, in this moment, what will make me feel safe
Right,
enough to be here while everything else, the transition, the change, the noise, whatever, is
right,
still busy unfolding, unpacking itself?
right.
What will make me feel safe right now? And always come back to that moment, because that's
Right.
where we begin with embedding capacity for us to be able to take that next step.
Absolutely. I think that people don't even think about that necessarily. And so the minute you crack that door open, then you
Mm.
start to get access to more information. So I love that.
Yeah,
Kim,
yeah.
tell our audience where they can find you.
So if you want to come to Cape Town, hey, I'm here. I'm
I'm
just
coming.
kidding. You can find me on LinkedIn, kimconradie.com. or email me at hello@kimconradie.com. So yeah, that's me under the Mindfulness Manor banner,
Awesome.
like that.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been
Thank you,
wonderful
Sharon, for
having you
having
here.
me. Sharon and I have got the time difference of 9 hours, so I'm living in the future now.
Yes. Well, we made it
And
work.
Sharon's just starting her day. Yeah,
Thank
but
you,
thank you for
Kim.
having me on your show, Sharon. I appreciate it, and I
You're welcome.
appreciate having an opportunity to speak to your listeners.
Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you again really soon.
Yes,
Maybe in Cape Town.
let's hope.
Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, transformation comes from action, not just knowledge. What will you apply from today's episode? Visit www.sharonsavitson.com for more resources. If this helped you, please subscribe and share. Let's up-level together.